She once held a piece of paper worth more than most people's houses, looked up calmly, and told the guys at a Las Vegas pawn shop that their million-dollar dream was actually a well-made fake. No shouting, no drama, just a quiet sentence that changed the deal in seconds. That woman became one of the most recognizable faces on Pawn Stars, and yet almost nobody watching knew her real story. She wasn't raised around rare books. She wasn't groomed for reality television. She built one of the most respected names in the antiquarian book trade almost by accident, and what she did after the cameras stopped rolling turned out to be even more interesting than anything she appraised on air. This is the real story of Rebecca Romney, told through what she has actually said, written, and built, not through rumor. Rebecca was born in 1985, and long before anyone knew her as the book lady from Gold and Silver Pawn Shop. She was simply a kid who grew up in a house full of readers. She has described her family as a family of scientists who loved science fiction, and that early diet of books shaped her more than any single class or teacher ever did. She wasn't the kid pointed toward antiquarian bookselling. If anything, the rare book world seemed like the last place she would end up. She gravitated toward ideas, language, and philosophy, the kind of subjects that make for great dinner conversation but don't usually lead to appraising a Shakespeare folio on national television. That academic curiosity followed her to college, where she studied philosophy and languages. She became fluent in several languages over the years, a skill set that would later turn out to be surprisingly useful in a business built on reading old handwriting, decoding printers' marks, and catching the tiny inconsistencies that separate a genuine first edition from a clever forgery. But when she graduated, she didn't have a rare book job lined up. She didn't have a 5-year plan involving Pawn Stars, Las Vegas, or a television crew. Her path into the book trade happened almost by chance. In 2007, Rebecca was hired by Bauman Rare Books when the company opened a new location in Las Vegas. She has talked about walking into that world with essentially no specialized background in antiquarian bookselling, only a sharp mind, strong research instincts, and a willingness to learn fast. That's a detail worth sitting with, because it cuts against the idea that experts like her simply inherited their knowledge. She built it book by book on the job, handling material that most people only ever see behind museum glass. Within a few years, she wasn't just handling inventory. She was running the gallery. By 2010, she had been promoted to manager of the Las Vegas location, a fast rise for someone who had entered the trade just 3 years earlier. It was during this stretch in Las Vegas that her path crossed with Rick Harrison and the team at Gold and Silver Pawn Shop. Las Vegas isn't a small town when it comes to population, but the world of serious antiques and rare documents in that city is a tight, specialized circle, and people in that circle tend to know each other. When the show needed someone who could look at an old book, letter, or historical document and give a real, defensible appraisal instead of a guess, Rebecca was already established enough in the local trade to be the obvious call. She made her first appearance on Pawn Stars in its 4th season, which aired in 2011, and from that point on she became a recurring presence whenever paper, books, or manuscripts came through the shop's doors. What made her stand out on screen wasn't theatrics. It was the opposite. Where reality television often rewards big reactions, Rebecca's approach was steady and understated. She would examine a binding, check the paper stock, look at the way ink had settled into the page over decades, and then explain her reasoning in plain language before giving a number. Viewers responded to that calm confidence. She became one of the show's most trusted recurring experts and one of the few women who appeared regularly across its lineup of specialists, appraising everything from early printed scientific works to historical documents tied to major moments in American history. Over the course of her career, both on and off camera, Rebecca has handled an extraordinary range of material that most people will never see in person. Shakespeare folios, first editions of Isaac Newton's Principia Mathematica, first editions of Charles Darwin's On the Origin of Species, and individual leaves salvaged from a Gutenberg Bible. Each of those categories comes with its own set of authentication challenges. A Shakespeare folio can be judged on the composition of individual leaves, since folios were sometimes assembled from mismatched printings over the centuries. A Darwin first edition lives or dies on details like the binding cloth and the specific advertisements bound into the back pages, since publishers changed those details between printing runs. This is the unglamorous, detail-obsessed side of rare book work that rarely makes it into a highlight reel. But it's exactly the skill set that built her reputation long before most viewers knew her name. That reputation for pairing patience with precision is also what made her a natural fit for teaching, not just selling. She has been a fixture at the antiquarian book seminar for years, working alongside other established dealers to train the next generation of people entering the trade. It's a role that says something about how the rare book world actually works. Expertise gets passed down person to person, seminar to seminar, far more than it gets built from any single television appearance. Her appraisals on the show touched an enormous range of material, because old paper covers a lot of ground. She has handled first editions connected to towering names in literature and science, evaluated historical documents with direct ties to major events, and more than once told a hopeful seller that what looked valuable at first glance didn't hold up once you looked closely at the details that actually matter in the trade. Printing errors, binding style, paper texture, and provenance. Those are the boring-sounding fundamentals that separate real expertise from guesswork, and it's exactly why the show leaned on her so heavily whenever a book or letter showed up on the counter. As her television profile grew, her career outside the show kept moving in parallel, and this is where her story starts to diverge from the version most casual viewers assume. In the mid-2010s, Rebecca transitioned from the Las Vegas gallery to Bauman Rare Books headquarters operations, a move that came with more responsibility over acquisitions and catalog production, the unglamorous but essential work of a serious rare book business. That shift also coincided with a major change in her personal life. In 2016, she married J.P. Romney, an author with family roots in Philadelphia, and the move that followed her marriage explains a detail that used to spark plenty of online speculation. Her television appearances became noticeably less frequent, not because of any scandal, but because she had relocated across the country for both her marriage and her career. That marriage is also where a lot of online curiosity about her name comes from. Through her husband, Rebecca became distantly connected by marriage to the broader Romney family, a name most Americans associate with national politics. It's a real connection, but a distant one, more a matter of shared surname and extended family ties than any direct relationship, and Rebecca has generally kept her professional identity separate from that family name's political weight. She built her reputation on decades of hands-on book expertise, not on any political association, and that's the version of her story worth telling accurately. In 2016, Rebecca and JP also launched a podcast together called Biblioclast, where they dug into stories from book history for a general audience, a preview of the kind of narrative nonfiction work she'd take further the following year. In 2017, the couple co-authored Printer's Error, Irreverent Stories from Book History, a book that pulled back the curtain on some of the strangest, funniest, and most surprising moments in the history of printing and publishing. It combined Rebecca's real-world trade knowledge with JP's storytelling instincts, and it gave her a public voice beyond her Pawn Stars appearances, something reality television rarely hands its experts. The book found an audience among readers who loved book history but had never set foot in an auction house, and it established Rebecca as someone with something to say beyond appraisal numbers. That same period marked the start of one of her most meaningful projects. In 2017, alongside Heather O'Donnell of Honey Wax Booksellers, Rebecca co-founded the Honey Wax Book Collecting Prize, an annual award recognizing outstanding book collections built by women 30 years old or younger. The prize wasn't about the dollar value of a collection. It was about the thinking behind it, the idea that a truly interesting collector doesn't need deep pockets, just a clear point of view about what they're gathering and why. Rebecca has talked about noticing a pattern in the book world. Plenty of women loved building collections but hesitated to call themselves collectors, a label that had long carried a certain gendered assumption in antiquarian circles. The prize was a direct answer to that gap, giving younger women collectors visibility, credibility, and a real foothold in a field that had historically been dominated by older men. Backed by respected names in the trade, the prize has continued for years, recognizing a wide range of collections built around everything from niche literary genres to deeply personal historical themes. Around 2016, Rebecca also began working with Honey Wax Booksellers in Brooklyn, continuing to build her reputation as a dealer while she and O'Donnell developed the prize together. It was a natural next step after leaving Bauman, giving her the chance to work in a smaller, more specialized shop while she figured out what she wanted to build next. That next step arrived in 2019, when she partnered with fellow bookseller Brian Cassidy to found Type Punch Matrix, a rare book firm based in the Washington, D.C. area. Cassidy brought his own decades of experience in the trade, particularly in countercultural and modern literary material, while Rebecca brought her generalist range, everything from early printed science to genre fiction. Together they built a firm that handles hand-pressed books, archives, manuscripts, and ephemera across a wide swath of print history, serving both individual collectors and institutions. Type Punch Matrix has grown into a respected name in its own right, gaining coverage from major outlets and building a reputation for handling material that doesn't always fit neatly into the traditional antiquarian mold. It hasn't been positioned as a flashy showroom chasing headline sales. It's been built around a specific philosophy: that book collecting should be more accessible and more diverse than the trade's traditional image suggests, and that mindful acquisition and preservation matter as much as the price tag on a rare item. Between the two founders, they bring decades of combined experience in the antiquarian trade, and their catalogs range from hand-pressed classics to counterculture ephemera to modern archives, reflecting Cassidy's long specialty in 20th-century material and Rebecca's broader generalist range. The firm has been featured in outlets including the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the Wall Street Journal, and it has built a client base that spans individual collectors and institutions alike, including work sourcing items for library and museum collections. That institutional side of the business matters more than it might seem at first glance. A rare book firm's real value isn't just in buying low and selling high, it's in the research trail that comes with every item, proving where a book has been, who owned it, and whether it matches the physical characteristics of a genuine first printing. That's the same skill set Rebecca demonstrated on television, just applied at a slower, more deliberate pace than a pawn shop counter ever allowed. Throughout all of this, Rebecca never fully disappeared from Pawn Stars. Even after her move away from Las Vegas reduced her day-to-day appearances, she has continued to show up on the series whenever her schedule and location allow, making her one of the longest-running specialists in the show's history and its only regular woman expert across its many seasons. She appeared in a later season examining a journal connected to the Lewis and Clark expedition, walking through exactly the kind of provenance issues, in that case library markings that hurt the item's value, that define real appraisal work far more than any dramatic reveal. She also returned for a spin-off special that took the crew beyond Las Vegas, reconnecting with the cast in a new setting while sizing up more historical material for the cameras. Rebecca has also been open about the mechanics of the show itself. In an online question-and-answer session, she addressed the recurring fan question about whether appraisals on Pawn Stars are staged, walking through specific examples of real transactions to explain how the process actually works behind the scenes. That kind of transparency fits her broader public persona: measured, direct, and more interested in getting the facts right than in playing up mystery for its own sake. Outside the pawn shop, Rebecca has spent years building institutional credibility that television alone could never provide. She sits on the board of the Antiquarian Booksellers Association of America, serves on the faculty of the Antiquarian Book Seminar, and holds membership in some of the oldest and most selective bibliophile societies in the world, including the Grolier Club in New York, one of the most storied book collecting institutions in the country. She was featured in The Booksellers, a 2019 documentary exploring the world of rare book dealing in New York, which introduced her to an audience well beyond reality television. Viewers and reviewers described her as bringing genuine warmth and sharp expertise to the screen. Her most significant recent project, though, is the book that arrived in February 2025, Jane Austen's Bookshelf, a rare book collector's quest to find the women writers who shaped a legend. The premise came from a realization Rebecca had about her own reading history. Despite years of formal education and a career built on identifying and valuing books, she found that she had never actually read most of the women writers who directly influenced Jane Austen, novelists like Frances Burney and Radcliffe, Charlotte Smith, Charlotte Lennox, Hannah More, Elizabeth Inchbald, Hester Lynch Thrale-Piazzi, and Maria Edgeworth. These were writers Austen herself referenced and admired, women whose novels sold thousands of copies in their own time and shaped the literary landscape Austen wrote into. Yet most of them had quietly disappeared from modern reading lists and academic canons. Rebecca set out to fix that gap in her own knowledge, and in doing so built an entire book around the process. She used her professional skill as a rare book hunter to track down original editions of these forgotten authors, piecing together not just their stories but the physical history of how their work survived, or in many cases nearly didn't. Each chapter of the book profiles one writer, tracing the connections between their work and Austen's, and using Rebecca's hands-on experience with the actual physical books to illuminate why these women mattered and how the literary canon quietly erased them over time. The book went on to become a USA Today bestseller and was named one of the Washington Post's best books of the year, drawing praise from critics and fellow authors for combining detective-style research with genuine literary insight. What makes Rebecca Romney's story compelling isn't a scandal or a sudden disappearance. It's the far less sensational but more impressive truth. A philosophy student who stumbled into an unfamiliar industry, taught herself its most demanding skills on the job, became one of the most trusted faces in a niche corner of reality television, and then used that visibility to build something lasting, a business, a prize supporting other collectors, and now a body of published work that's reshaping how readers think about literary history. She didn't need a dramatic exit to make her story worth telling. The real arc, from a Bauman Rare Books hiring mistake in 2007 to a best-selling author and respected antiquarian dealer nearly 2 decades later, is more interesting precisely because it's true. If there's a lesson buried in her career, it's that expertise built slowly, through actual hands-on work with real objects and real research, tends to outlast the flashier version of a story that gets repeated online without evidence. Rebecca Romney's path through Pawn Stars was never really about the show. It was one visible chapter in a much longer, quieter career spent chasing forgotten books, correcting the historical record, and proving that the most interesting discoveries in the rare book world usually come from patience, not spectacle.